I mean, I know most people probably don't feel this way, but I feel like horror is pretty much ingrained in Christmas and the holidays, like as is. Because you've got things like, oh, you had a question?
No, that's impossible because Spirit Halloween closes.
Well, no, but now they've got Spirit Christmas.
Oh.
But bad news for Party City. I hear that they're closing all their stores.
Yeah, they did a Toys R Us.
Yeah. But I guess what I mean by that is like, what is it? What song is it? There's a Christmas carol that says it. Most wonderful time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has the line in there of like marshmallows for toasting and carolers out in the snow. There'll be scary ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmases long, long ago.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's like it's there. A Christmas Carol, the Ebenezer Scrooge story, is a ghost story. He is visited by 3 ghosts. Well, technically he's visited by more ghosts than that, but we know of him being visited by 3 ghosts plus Marley.
And if it's Muppets,
right,
and Marley.
Yes, so even more ghosts than that one. That one's especially spooky.
It's the spookiest.
Plus, then you have the Grinch, who like isn't necessarily horror, but like
he's objectively a monster.
Right, he's a monster who hates Christmas and he wants to destroy it. He wants to steal it away from other people.
He eats garbage. He lives in a hole in a mountain. Yeah, he's a monster.
He has a little mangy dog that lives with him.
Assumedly abuses.
Yeah. And I mean, even just the idea of like Santa Claus. He's a man who can see you at all times. And he knows everything that you do, good, bad, or otherwise. And then once a year, he breaks into every single person's house on the planet.
Well, almost.
Well, yeah.
Because he's not only observing everything you do and everything everyone is doing, but he is viewing them through a moral lens and he is judging them.
Yes.
And then executes either a reward or a punishment, which is terrifying.
Yeah. Anything that I can do down here just in my day-to-day life is going to either get me, like the toy that I want, the thing that I want most in my heart, or a fossil fuel. It's
the Netflix show, The Good Place. He tabulates all of your actions with a very fine-tooth comb and point system. And at the end of the year, if you haven't done well enough, he either gives you coal, which, by the way, I don't know, a lot of people don't know this. Coal is radioactive. So what he's really giving you is early stage cancers.
Yeah.
And either that, and that's for things like, you've taken cookies without asking, or you stayed outside too late and you are given a horrendous disease fueling piece of rock.
To Santa, that's the equivalent.
Yeah. That's what you deserve. Everybody, and welcome to the Third Channel Podcast,
where we delve into the horror franchises you love from the perspectives of a lifelong horror fan
and a newbie to the genre. I'm PJ.
And I'm Derek.
And today, the only thing we're here to talk about, like we're here to talk about every time you listen to us speak, is horror. But also Christmas.
Yeah, so specifically this week, it's holiday horror, which is some of my favorite kind of horror.
Immediately, and it's not pre-written, by the way. We just happen to say the same thing every week. But our not pre-written intro says it's the only thing to talk about, but it is not. We have a lot of things to talk about. Some housekeeping right off the bat. My voice is a little gunky. Little higher pitch, little stuck up in the dog whistle registers. Lots happened since we finished. We finished talking about Scream.
Yeah.
And then I was punished for us having to move on and talk about a different franchise by the God that is puppeting us and making us create this podcast. So I had just a touch of back surgery, but now I'm back.
As one does.
Yeah, just a tad. a kiss of back surgery, if you will. But the tube that they put in my throat to keep me alive has then soured my throat. It soured it.
That sucks.
Yeah. But I'm here and I am ready to talk about a very interesting movie.
Yeah, it's the first time that we're having to do kind of what are we calling it? A palate cleanser of an episode?
Yeah.
The bridge between two franchises.
We are sad to see Scream go, as it's one of our favorites collectively. And you know, hopefully if Scream 7 graces us at some point in the next couple years, if it doesn't get pushed back any further, you know, we'll be able to talk about Scream again. But in the meantime, we do have to move on. And so I think your idea was, instead of moving directly to the next franchise, let's take just a little stroll into something else to kind of shake off the cobwebs before we tackle another kind of longer franchise.
Yeah, and I think this one falls into a couple interesting places because of time of year, but also like what we just got done talking about. So I figured, like, let's go to another movie that has like some tie that we can make to the Scream franchise, the slasher genre, if you will. And then this one also just happens to be the last episode of the year. It's right here around Christmas time, right around the holidays. And so we'd go out with a Christmas classic, if you will.
Bob Clark's A Christmas Story. Let me tell you, watching this and rewatching this week to prepare to discuss it and taking notes on it, I found A Christmas Story as boring as I did offensive to my modern sensibilities. It also didn't scare me in any way. I don't know why we've picked this one.
Is this what you watched while you were in the hospital?
Over and over. This and Elf, buddy.
Wow. I got news for you, man. We are watching a Bob Clark film.
Oh.
We're not watching or talking about A Christmas Story. As much as I love that film, and I don't know what you're talking about, not enjoying it.
I know you, and I know you change your mind last minute all the time. You're not meticulously planned to the point where it gives you problems in your life.
Right.
You like to fly by the seat of your pants. So thinking that you might switch last minute, I also watched Porky's just many times.
Again, I don't. Why would you even? That's not even a Christmas movie.
No, but you know,
But I do understand why it would offend your present day sensibilities.
Yeah. It's very. I clutched my pearls the entire time.
Talking about a movie you couldn't get away with making today.
No.
We're talking about proto slasher, if you will, 1974's Black Christmas.
Black Christmas, a movie that around the holidays, when we first started watching all of these movies, you were like, well, yeah, we're going to watch Black Christmas, which largely got an eye roll from me because, and we've talked about this before, but there are always holiday movie posters that are for horror movies that are like, Santa's back in town, and this time the reindeers aren't the only thing he's going to slay. And it's got like some, you know,
Gary Busey of a gingerbread man running around.
Right. Or it's not the one where it's Michael Keaton as Jack Frost.
No, but the other Jack Frost.
The other Jack Frost. What I will say...
That movie's great.
What I will say is I have seen the monster from the movie, the horror film Jack Frost. And I have also seen the android makeup of Michael Keaton as a snowman. And that's scarier.
Yeah.
Michael Keaton's face as a snowman's is much scarier. But yeah, Black Christmas. Do you want to do the IMDb summary? This one is short, sweet, and to the point.
Yeah, I guess that's how we can jump in, and then I'll do some other facts and figures and get us set for this new movie.
This is as close to a perfect synopsis as you can probably get without getting your eyes wet.
That's good. I haven't looked at it. I've been leaving that up to you.
During their Christmas break, a group of sorority girls are stalked by a stranger. End of synopsis.
Yeah, that's simple. It's to the point, but it's exactly what this movie is.
It also leaves a lot out because that's the problem. Is most synopses are very detailed. This one is stalked by a stranger. What happens? Watch the movie and find out.
Yes, Black Christmas. We've mentioned it before in previous discussions. It's mentioned in a couple of the Scream films because it is a very early. Thought of as an early slasher film. It technically falls before our quote-unquote beginning of the slasher genre in 1978 with Halloween, because this came out in 1974. It was released it's a Canadian-made film. Bob Clark, who is an American director, but he at some point went north of the border and started making movies up there because like Porky's is a Canadian-made film. Several of his movies are, and I think it's just for the tax breaks and things like that.
Sure.
But so it was released October 11th of 74 in Canada, and then December 20th of 74 in the U.S.
Okay.
So, just in time for the holidays, directed by Bob Clark. Now, Bob Clark, we've already kind of like played with the idea, but truly a bizarre range of films that this man directed.
When I discovered that A Christmas Story and those movies, like Porky's, the ones we've already mentioned, and like going through his, because I was watching, that's a true bit of trivia. I did watch A Christmas Story while in the hospital. It was one of the movies that they had from their menu. And it opens and it's directed by, I was like, and Carly's sitting to my right, and I was like, get the fuck out of here. Seriously? She's like, what? I was like, hold on. I look up Black Christmas. I'm like, this guy directed Black Christmas too. And she's like, I don't care about either of these movies. And it was just like, all right,
which is a shame, but it is wild that he created two like Christmas classics that didn't light up the world whenever they first came out, but then subsequently in the years that followed really got a following.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 remakes of Black Christmas currently and A Christmas Story. You can buy that fucking lamp at Target right now.
Well, and it plays, I can't remember, is it TBS that plays it every year at Christmas for 24 hours straight?
I think so.
On Christmas Day. I think it's TBS.
They recently made a sequel to it as well.
Yes, and what's funny is, so that was like last year, the year before, they made A Christmas Story 2, or A Christmas Story Christmas, I think is what it's called, because technically there had been a straight-to-DVD Christmas Story 2 with like, it takes place a couple years later, and there's like a teenaged Ralphie, and it is awful. It is god-awful. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Okay.
Because I, as I do, take it upon myself to watch terrible things sometimes so that no one else has to.
That's what this show is about.
Pretty much. And so the year that Christmas Story Christmas came out, I watched Christmas Story 2. It's bad. Christmas Story Christmas, actually a pretty good legacy sequel. Checking in on those if you like the original.
Okay.
If it's not like your thing, the original isn't your thing, then you're not going to care for it at all. But seeing those actors, reprise those roles and come back and kind of checking in on this family again later on. Now, what's funny is Bob Clark had directed a couple other horror films before Black Christmas. He had done Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things in 72. He did a movie called Death Dream in 74 as well. Then he did Black Christmas. After that, he did Porky's and Porky's 2 the next day. Then A Christmas Story is in 83. So nearly 10 years after Black Christmas, he does another Christmas movie. He does Rhinestone, which is with Sylvester Stallone. And I believe he moves to Nashville to have a country career and falls in love with Dolly Parton.
Right.
He did My Summer Story in 94, which, talking about Christmas Story, My Summer Story is a sequel to A Christmas Story following those characters again, but during the summer. It's like a summer vacation movie. Because in my research for A Christmas Story, there's like 7 movies that all take place with that family. They're all made by different people. There are like summer vacations and different things, just checking it. But it's like the only one that's ever been a hit is A Christmas Story.
Is it the same cast of people?
It's not the same cast.
Okay,
No,
weird.
it is a bizarre, like look that franchise up. It is weird. And then after that, he did everyone's favorite from 1999, Baby Geniuses, and the follow-up, Super Babies, Baby Geniuses 2 in 2004. 2 of the worst things I've ever seen.
You've seen those?
I have. I remember seeing both of those as a child.
Okay.
I believe I saw Baby Geniuses 2, Super Babies in theaters. I would have been about 13 or 14.
Is that what stunted you?
And even my 13 and 14-year-old brain was like, this is bad.
It was like, no, I got to be a super baby.
I've missed out on so much.
Yeah, why wasn't I a fucking baby genius? This is terrible.
Directed by Bob Clark, written by Roy Moore.
Damn it, Bob Clark and Roy Moore. Derek feels inadequate compared to those goddamn baby geniuses.
And I want to mention on this one, the cinematographer is Reginald H. Morris. And that's because I think the cinematography in this film is really where it shines for me. Budget, not a big budget on this movie.
No.
$686,000.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I have box office numbers for both Canada and then worldwide. So in Canada, it made a little over $1 million, 1.3 million. Worldwide, it gained at least $4 million. I guess that was in its initial run.
Okay.
And again, I don't adjust anything for anything, so it is what it is.
We're not that podcast, folks.
No, we are not. To I guess set up what this movie is for the most part, we kind of have to spoil a big part of what they treat as a twist in this movie.
Yeah, it's funny because we moved from Scream to Black Christmas, and I don't know if you intended this, but it was like watching Black Christmas, and it's like, oh, the killer calls. That's funny. It's a coincidence. And I was like, no, he probably fucking planned that, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
It was good. And it was just that parallel was, I think, interesting. But because of the calls, it is. So, as always, spoiler alert for the movie that's in the title of the episode. So, spoilers for Black Christmas. The killer, who is kind of now, like, you know, in hindsight, people who enjoy that movie, we call him Billy because that's the name that is said the most often during his rambling, multi-voiced phone calls.
But the killer technically is not given a name within the film.
Right. And so he terrorizes the sorority girls with these phone calls, these disgusting phone calls, which is funny because you and I were looking for a clip of this film to play, and we're like, well, we can't use his phone calls because they're disgusting.
Yeah.
And like lurid. And please.
Like we can talk about them, but I don't necessarily just want to play them outright.
Right. No. If you're interested, if you haven't seen the movie and you're interested to hear what those phone calls are, take it from us. They're disgusting. Feel free to listen to them on your own. But the big reveal is that he is hiding, this killer is hiding in this sorority house as he kind of kills, the people that live in it. I was going to say the girls, but Miss Mac.
Yeah.
He kills the people who live in this house kind of one by one, and then each time there's a phone call that plays afterwards.
Yeah, and the whole thing is inspired by the urban legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs, which is I don't know if you were really into urban legends like as a kid or anything.
Not really.
So do you know the website Snopes?
Yeah.
Like that everyone uses now to prove or disprove that something is true or not on the internet. Before Snopes became Snopes, it was still Snopes, like the website was Snopes.com back then, but it really just covered like urban legends, like the what I already said, the babysitter and the man upstairs, or the lovers on Lover's Lane who are terrorized by a man with a hook for a hand, or alligators in the sewers of New York, like just different like urban legends that just kind of get passed around. And it would just kind of give like the history of them and then whether or not they could or could not be true. And then Snopes itself has kind of evolved into what it is now, where it's like they prove things. Just a strange thing. But if you don't know, the babysitter and the man upstairs, that urban legend is mainly about a babysitter gets left to watch these children. She puts them up to bed. You know, the parents have left for a night out in the town. She puts the children to bed. She starts getting these obscene phone calls from a someone who's just breathing into the phone. And then eventually he starts going, "Have you checked the children?"
Right.
"Have you checked the children?" And she's freaking out and she keeps hanging up and he keeps calling back, every half hour or so. And eventually she goes upstairs and finds that the children have been murdered and that the calls have been coming from inside the house. That then is used in, I don't know how many different movies, like as the crux of so many things. And this is like kind of seen as the first one to really do it.
Yeah.
Now, a few years later, there's a movie called When a Stranger Calls, which is also referenced in the Scream films. And the first 20 minutes of that movie came out in 1979, so like 5 years after this. And the first 20 minutes of that is like just an abbreviated version of that. It's basically the Casey Becker opening scene, but stretched for 20 minutes, and it's the babysitter and the man upstairs. I have yet to see When a Stranger Calls. I've seen the remake that came out in the early aughts, but there was a sequel to When a Stranger Calls called When a Stranger Calls back in 1993. Those inspired the opening of Scream. We've talked about that, I believe, briefly, but there have been other ones. There was a movie before Black Christmas called Foster's Release that came out in 1971. There's The Severed Arm in 1973, and then Black Christmas. But you've also got a couple more that came out after that. So this is a trope that has been used over and over again. that's based on, a whole urban legend thing. But it's also based on these murders that took place in the Westmount neighborhood of Montreal, Quebec. Most likely based on the Canadian serial killer Wayne Bowden, who killed 3 women in Montreal between October of 1969 and January of 1970. And his 4th known victim was murdered in Calgary, Alberta, in 71. He was known as the vampire rapist. That was his...
God.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, he did those awful things to those poor vampires.
I don't think that's what that means. But written by Roy Moore, and he had originally written it under the screenplay was written under the title Stop Me, which was based on the Lipstick Killer, another serial killer from the 1940s in Chicago. And that was like Stop Me was something that he would write in lipstick on, after he committed these murders. Kind of goading the police along to try and find him. And Bob Clark had felt that the original script was too much of a straightforward like slasher horror movie, and he had already made several horror movie, a couple horror movies before that, and he's like, I don't want to do that. So he made some alterations to the dialogue. He incorporated some humorous elements through Barb, through the police, through Mrs. Mack. Mrs. Mack, he based on his own aunt who was a drunk.
Well, she would have to be.
Yeah.
For Mrs. Mack to be based off of you have to be a drunk.
And he really wanted it to depict college students or high school students. He felt that they hadn't been depicted up till that point with any sense of like reality. And so he really wanted to treat these young women as if they were real people. And so the reactions, he tries to get as real, and they're not just like, bumbling bimbos running around in this house. It's like they have agency. Things are happening to them. They go to the police and they go, hey, this is a thing that you need to take seriously. And then some of the other things, like not subtext because it's right out there on Front Street, but like some of the issues that they're dealing with in this are very feminist and forward thinking, especially for something that comes in 1974.
Yeah.
So he also said it would be the last horror film that he made. And they did talk about a sequel, but I'll get to that toward the end of, I think, this whole discussion.
Sure.
And then the other big thing is that whenever it was scheduled for its primetime network television debut on NBC, it was scheduled on January 28th of 1978. It was going to release under the title Stranger in the House. But on January 15th, like 2 weeks prior, 2 female students at Florida State University were murdered by an assailant who broke into their sorority house where they lived. And then 3 other young women in the immediate vicinity were attacked and assaulted. Those were later identified to be the workings and the killings of serial killer Ted Bundy.
So that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
That's like the horror Christmas movie equivalent of Lilo and Stitch flying past the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we can't do that.
Yeah. And so they were like, NBC was like, we're not going to show that.
I don't think they were going to fly by the Twin Towers. I think they were in an airplane, like a commercial airliner. Yes. And they were like, no, we have to change that. So then they put them in like a silly spaceship.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are other examples of that in history of about to do a thing and then some hellacious real life event makes you juggle everything and Horror Nights.
Yeah, that's a really good example. That's the first one that jumps to my mind is, we don't start Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Orlando. Because I forget, like when we talked about it in our first episode, like we just throw out like, Horror Nights as if everybody knows what that is.
Yeah.
But not everybody lives, in Florida and around Orlando and can do that.
Or cares.
Or cares. But yeah, Halloween Horror Nights, Universal Orlando, their big like banner year where they created their own icon in Jack the Clown. The following year, they then wanted to follow it up with another icon, his brother, Eddie.
Who's like a Hannibal Lecter mask wearing chainsaw wielding psycho violent murderer.
Everything was super violent over the whole event, like ultra violent.
Right. Then 9/11 happens and
like
they went
2 weeks before the event is supposed to open.
They scrapped the Eddie entirely, the brother.
Yeah,
they
were
scrapped
just
that
like,
character entirely.
just put Jack back in there. He's a clown. Spooky clowns scare me.
Spooky clowns have nothing to do with airplanes or
yeah, cannot be taken as like, oh yeah, this is a person who would hide a box cutter in their shoe and then.
The other strange thing is that Eddie, the brother, had like the Hannibal Lecter mask, but he also wore a pilot's hat. And that was obviously immediately very inappropriate. They had to cancel it.
No go, no fly zone.
Yeah.
Hello?
Who is this?
It's Jess.
Miss Bradford, this is Sergeant Nash. Are you the only one in the house?
No. Phil and Barbara are upstairs asleep. Why?
All right. Now, I want you to do exactly what I tell you without asking any questions, okay? No questions. Now, just put the phone back on the hook, walk to the front door, and leave the house.
What's wrong?
Please, Miss Bradford, please just do as I tell you.
Okay. I'll get Phil and Barbara.
No, don't do that, Jess. Jess, the caller is in the house. The calls are coming from the house. Jess! Jess, get up! And don't go up there. Don't go upstairs, Jess. Miss Bradford.
The calls are coming from inside of the house. That's a whole saying now.
Yeah.
That means if you're talking or complaining about something that you yourself are very guilty of, calls coming from inside of the house.
Yeah.
So,
but it starts here and then is repeated again in When a Stranger Calls a few years later. That is what I like. One of the things that I like most about this movie and where I think a lot of the horror comes from is that it is very simple in its idea of there is a person in your home, the place that you should feel the most secure and safe, and you do not know that they are there.
Yeah.
And that they are like...
Who they are, what they're capable of, you don't know. And if it's sinister, you don't know to protect yourself, which could you even, if prepared. That's always the scary part about Halloween is that, Annie doesn't know that he's there and he surprises her and he kills her horribly. And Laurie knows that he's there at a certain point and it's a 50-50. Is she going to survive? So in this one, it's an early example of they don't know. They're not prepared. They're young college girls and Billy is a fucking psychopath living in their attic.
Yeah. That's another interesting difference between this and Scream.
Yeah.
Is in Scream, the biggest thing is like, it's a whodunit. So the whole movie we're sitting there going, well, who is this masked killer?
Right.
In this film, Billy we don't ever see who he is.
We see his eyeball.
We see his eyeball. We see his hands. We see a shadowed silhouette. We never get a full picture of who he is. But we also are given from the very beginning of the film, we, the audience, have so much more information than the victims in this story.
Oh, yeah.
Where like Scream doesn't do that. Scream is very much, we know about as much as they know.
Yeah.
This is like, no, we watch him crawl up a lattice and go into their attic and then
pretty immediately strangle a girl with like a garment plastic, like a garment sleeve.
And so it's that thing of like, they do treat it as a big reveal at the end of like, the calls are coming with inside the house. But it's like, well, yeah, he's been in the house the whole time. We know that.
Yeah.
They don't know that.
And our lead actress who...
Olivia Hussey?
Yes. Who is great in this. And there is no explanation to her accent in any way. And that doesn't bother me because they're in college. It doesn't bother me. People go to, Americans go to England. The English come to America for college all the time. So that doesn't bother me. It's an easy way to kind of, yes, Olivia is English. Shut the fuck up. It's not important. I think her reaction to that dialogue, her facial journey of I need to call upstairs because my friend and they end up, being dead anyway. But my friends are upstairs and I need to call up to them to get their attention, to bring them downstairs. But I can't do that because if I do, I risk being
alerting
and being
killer,
killed myself.
And then it's pretty harrowing.
Yeah.
Like that moment. And I think that's it. It's like this movie is very simple in what it's doing, and it's still like terrifying to think about. Those very easy, simple things.
I think the most haunting image, and it's the first kill of the movie, is Claire. I think the scariest image of the entire film is her in the attic in that rocking chair, and she's got that plastic around her face, and it's like it's concaved into her mouth, as she clearly suffocated on it. He never takes the plastic off, and he just sets her in that chair. And the reason it's so haunting is that's a scary image. A dead body's always a scary image. Especially, I've remarked on this show about how the silhouette of someone hanging, I think, is one of the scariest things in the world. And I think I think the psychology behind that might be that it's scary to see someone dead and how the way they died still lingering. You saw, somebody dead with a knife in their neck. It's chilling because you can imagine what their reaction would be like. And I think in this visual of her in that chair, because they never find her, which is something that I bitched to you about the last time we watched this movie. I was like, does no one think like, oh, Claire's missing? She's been missing all night, all day. We're going to call the cops. And it's like, well, did everybody check the whole house? Like, well, yeah, I think we did. Okay, well,
it's
check
like
the attic.
they
check
checked
the basement.
everywhere but the attic, maybe but the basement.
Because it's got a record player and like a rocking chair and a view, and then like the center of the attic is all cleared out. You would imagine people have been up there.
Yeah, I think the thing that they kind of try and explain it away with is whenever we get to Mrs. Mack going up there, she says like, oh, I've got to come up here and clean this out someday. Is like maybe they don't use it very often. Maybe it literally is just for storage.
Yeah. I just if we were in this house and you went missing, I would check the attic.
Yeah.
Like before I called the police. I
like
would
if my
check
car's
everywhere.
still parked outside and like,
it's like, did he go in the attic maybe and fall? Mm-hmm. Did he go in the attic and producer Ty, who lives up in the attic, jumped him and strangulated him? Did you do that, Ty?
The world may never know.
You know what's wonderful about because I agree. I think that is the most like just the image, the haunting image of her, just the plastic wrapped around her face. She's been suffocated, and he just stuffs her in this chair in the front window. And it's like, it's there. Like if you are looking for it on the outside of the house, you can see it. And it's just, Billy is psychotic. He doesn't care. Mm-hmm. It's right there, right in everybody's face. Now, what's interesting with the actress who played Claire, Lynn Griffin, this was like one of her first big roles as far as I'm aware. Her mother was her like agent at the time. And so she was like very excited to get this role and then like kind of sad that like, oh, she's going to be the first one killed. Okay.
Oh, okay.
But what I will say is like they cut back to Claire in the attic like so frequently.
But they knew.
Yeah.
They knew that was creepy, that was exceptionally disturbing.
Yes. But then what I'm impressed with is like, that's actually her. They didn't create a dummy that looks like her to sit there. So she is having to sit there with a bag on her face, like stuffed into her mouth as if she has suffocated on it. And from what I know, she had like poked holes in it to where she could get air in and out. But she was a swimmer and a diver, and so she could hold her breath for a very long time.
Okay.
And she could hold her eyes open for a very long time without blinking. And so, I mean, there are like long takes of that sometimes where like Billy is like rocking the chair back and forth, and she never breaks. And it's just, I just think it's a really good performance as a dead body.
Yeah. Yeah. And moreover, the fact that it is in that window, that it's staged in that way, because he does that a couple times where he'll stage a body. Mm-hmm. When, and we'll get to their actual deaths, but when she discovers, our heroine, when she discovers that her friends Phyllis and Barbara are dead, they have been like kind of slumped together in bed and are like kind of staged. Like Michael stages sometimes, he'll stage his victims. And I think that's maybe, part of that inspiration, because it's weird in this one. It's weird. And
it's one of those things that like, that was probably like, John Carpenter probably borrowed that from this in Black Christmas, and then Sean S. Cunningham's borrowed that for the kills and things that are set up in the first Friday the 13th movie from Halloween. So it's like everybody, borrows from everybody else.
Yeah. And Sean S. Cunningham was like, oh, I like that door thing. Let's do that door thing.
Yeah.
And then it's almost, it is.
And
we'll get there with both of those movies eventually, but it's
nearly identical.
almost plagiarism.
What else is funny is that Lynn Griffin, who played Claire in this movie, she also then last year, 2023, she is in Thanksgiving. Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. She plays the grandma.
That's amazing.
So she's back doing
Horror.
holiday horror.
Holiday horror.
After all these years.
The schlockiest of the schlock.
Truly.
Campiest of the camp.
We mentioned Olivia Hussey. She most famously before this played Juliet in Romeo and Juliet from like 1960, whatever year.
Yeah.
It's the one that everybody watches in high school.
Yeah. And every me falls in love with her. It wasn't high school for me. I think it was really early on.
Yeah, like junior high.
Yeah. And it was just like, she was just a very, very pretty girl.
Yeah. And she did a couple other horror movies after this, but wasn't a big horror fan. She's in both in 1990. She's in Psycho 4 at the beginning, and she's in Stephen King's It, the miniseries.
Which I didn't know that she was in It, but then looking up photos, it's, oh, right.
Yeah. Because, she looks very, very much the same.
And then the other big casting call here is Peter.
He was earlier than this. I mean, his big one is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
He
like
did
the lead of that movie.
Yeah, he's one of the astronauts, in the main section of that movie. So, big role there, big get. Margot Kidder, she was in Sisters, which is a Brian De Palma film before this in 72, and then she gets this. And then in 78, she gets Lois Lane in Superman. And she plays Lois Lane then in Superman 2, 3, and 4. Superman 4.
A Quest for Peace.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then I know that's your favorite.
It is. It's not my favorite Superman film. It's my favorite film.
That's incredible.
And then stuff happens to her later on. And much like the phone call of this film that we are not going to discuss and that you need to look. Well, we're going to discuss them. But we're not going to say what he says.
Yeah.
You have to look those up. You have to look up what happens.
Yeah. She's also in the Amityville Horror in 79, so that's another horror film.
Oh, okay.
But those are your big, some of your big actors. We'll touch on a couple more as we go on. But yeah, film starts with Christmas music and Christmas lights on this sorority house. And we quickly go from we go to the killer's POV. It's one of the earliest examples of that. It's not the first. If you were paying attention during Scream 4 or our discussion of Scream 4, you know that is the trick question that Kirby is given on the phone by the killer at the end of what is the first slasher film that puts the audience in the killer's point of view. And he gives 4 examples. It's none of them. It is Peeping Tom from 1960. Came out before Psycho. And last week, to get geared up for this, I actually watched Peeping Tom for the first time.
How was it?
It was very good.
Good.
It was very, very good.
We'll have to watch it.
It's one of those Technicolor 60s flicks, and it is like, it's interesting, some of the things that they were going for that far back. But they do use the killer's point of view. He crawls up this lattice into the attic.
Or Billy, yeah.
Billy, yes. And what's crazy is and every time I watch it, I'm still amazed by it because it's shot, from his point of view, but then you see both hands come into frame and climb up this lattice.
From what I understand, listening to commentary and listening to people, talk about the film, apparently it was like your ye olde GoPro where he had built a body harness that held the camera on top of his head.
Yeah.
Which is...
It was from his head and his shoulders. And because this is before Steadicam had been invented.
Yeah.
So any of the POV shots, any of the moving shots like that are handheld or from this rig.
Right.
That, I have the name. The camera operator was Bert Dunk was his name. And, rigged that up on his shoulders and his head. And, I mean, it's insane.
It pays dividends.
Yeah.
The whole movie is watchable, probably due in part to that rig. Because every time it cuts to him, it should just be a blurry mess.
Right. But it's not. And it's this steady, just image, even when he's freaking out later on and he's slamming things around, but it's like, you can follow it completely. It's not like a handheld. It's not shaky cam.
I think a lot of that probably has to do with the edit, probably has to do with adding, some Foley, giving the crashes and whatnot, but it does translate as like a Citizen Kane room thrashing.
Yeah.
In that attic, and no one heard it.
No, there's several things like that are kind of
Mrs. Mac hears the fucking cat in the attic, which is where we'll go next. But nobody hears him going, smashing shit in the attic. He's up here going, she's up here, guys. I put a bag on her head. And everyone's like, we have to go to the police.
I've thought about that with several things in this movie. Like even the obscene phone calls is sometimes he gets very loud and shouty.
He's like
and it's
screaming.
Like, well, he's just up those stairs right there.
He's like, Agnes, Agnes. And they're like, does anybody know anybody named Agnes? No, why? Oh, no. Name just popped into my head. It's like, guys, the call's coming from inside of the house.
So our first of the obscene phone calls happens, which whenever Jess, our lead, takes it, I think she says that this is the, I don't know how many times this has already happened, but it's like, she's like, the call, oh man, what does she call him? The breather or the
moaner?
The moaner, that's it. The moaner. And so all the girls come down and they listen.
The Moaner is actually the sequel to that Vincent Price movie, The Tingler.
Oh.
Yeah. And then the theater, instead of doing the buzzers to make tingles under people's seats, theater ushers would just run up and go like, right to your ear.
That's far worse. That's awful.
A theater attendant, hot breath.
No, please.
Especially in this post-COVID world, that's a nightmare.
That is a nightmare. The audio from these is from all the calls that come through are done by several performers, because what we very quickly learn is or hear is there's like at least 3 different voices that we're hearing, but
a woman's voice, a man's voice, and like children's voices.
But they're not like they overlap each other. It's something that like a human couldn't pull off by themselves,
right?
And so it's this weird.
It's like Roman Bridger from Scream 3.
Yeah.
It's like, well, he shouldn't have been able to do all that. And it's like, Billy is the best fucking ventriloquist of all time.
And that's what Barb says. It's just like, oh, he's added stuff to his act. Okay.
Yeah. Her roasting him is so funny. And then it's scary when it doesn't work. And like she falters because he's saying, again, vile, unrepeatable stuff will get demonetized.
Before we even do.
Speaking of, we'd like to talk about our sponsor today, which is, of course, Raid Tubi Legends. Come on, Tubi.
Yeah.
Sponsor us. Everybody, if you guys like our show, reach out on social media in any way that you see fit to Tubi and tell them, hey, guys, Third Channel Podcast fucking loves you.
Yeah.
They love you so much.
Love your service.
Please sponsor them. Not with money. Not with money.
No.
Just all we want to say is at the beginning of this show, we want to go as and what we have to talk about this week, like every week, is horror. This show sponsored by Tubi, and that's all we want. Please, we don't need your money.
Yeah,
it'll be a Christmas miracle.
Please do that. Actually, what's funny, while you're doing that on socials and you're following us on all the things. We've added a new line. If you look in the description for each episode of the podcast, down toward the bottom, there's a thing that's called "Send Us a Text," and it allows you to send us a text message that we can see and reply to. I haven't tried it yet, so please, somebody do that. I'd love to see what that does.
The most horrifying possibility is that we start getting the transcripts of the phone calls from Black Christmas. And now that I've said that, we have to keep this in to be integral. That's what we're going to get.
I can't wait. Cannot wait.
Yeah.
Bob Clark, apparently, during the scene when they're doing the obscene phone call for the first time, he's just giving them like just dialogue off screen to get their reaction, but then they just cut in all the stuff, all the horrible things afterwards. So that's all an after thing. But
it's very much the opposite of Scream, where Wes Craven brutalized and terrified Drew Barrymore so much that the police tapped the phone line and were like, hey guys, cut it the fuck out.
Which is like funny because that is a plot point in this movie, is tapping a phone line and the cops trying to trace a call.
Yeah.
I love the reaction shot in that scene because the camera work. So the camera starts on Jess talking on the phone and it moves to Barb's face and it moves all the way around to all the girls, but it's all one continuous shot. It's, and they're all at different distances from the camera and everything, but it's a very moving, it continues to move around the room that they're sitting in. It's all very tight up on all of their faces to really see their reaction, but it never loses focus. Like the focus puller was insane on this movie.
Yeah.
Just because of how they had to have kept track of all that and just dialed it in perfectly as they move from face to face to face. It's one of those more subtle things, but if you're really looking at like cinematography, I think that shot is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because then immediately following that, once Barb kind of takes over, they just start cutting around to things, and it's like, okay, yeah, all this looks fine, but like that shot is really impressive for like a really simple thing.
Yeah.
But yes, again, like her taking charge for a second, but then faltering, just not being sure.
It's the brashness of like, no, give me this fucking phone. I'm dealing with this, and then she gets disturbed.
Yeah, because it goes from being an obscene, like sexual thing that he's doing to I'm going to kill you.
Yeah,
and it's like you see her eyes widen ever so slightly.
Yeah.
We are then introduced to Mrs. Mack.
Now, we watched this movie originally with Dylan, a name that, hi Dylan, a name, if you listen, you don't, a name that we'll bring up a million times. One of our closest friends, somebody we play Magic the Gathering with.
Yeah.
Got that. We don't need them to know that we play anything like that. We need them to think we're cool. But he's a very good friend of ours, and we watched it with him. And he made this movie so much more special because he fell in love with this character of Miss Mack. Because Miss Mack is immediately revealed to be this like
she is the den mother,
the house mother.
The house mother. Yeah. Thank you.
And she is in charge of these girls and their safety and the sorority, and she has stashed booze everywhere. It is her character's staple. It is like. At one point, one of the first things that happens is they give her a gift, and it's like a dress, and they're like, try it on. And she's like, okay. And she tries it on, and she's like, you happy now? And she's all put out because she thinks it's ugly. And they all like, yay. And they go upstairs, and she opens a cabinet, which is like a library. It's like a hutch with a collection of books, and it's an encyclopedia. And she's like, and B for booze. And she pulls out the book and opens it. There's a cutout. All the pages, like the classic gun in the book. Yeah,
like you'd hide like a gun.
But it's a bottle of like bourbon.
Sherry.
Yeah. And she opens it and she starts drinking from it. And then they coming back down the stairs. It's like, oh shit. She slams the book. But like she
has like 5 or 6 different hiding places around the house.
There's like
the best one I think is in the toilet tank.
The toilet tank is great. Apparently a real thing that people would do. Per Bob Clark in his own commentary. Which, by the way, inspired film directors, future film directors, or existing film directors, God forbid, if you're listening to us right now, if you're going to do commentary, even if it's a stranger that you pay money and hire to show up and just talk off of, don't do commentary alone.
Yeah.
It's awful. It's such a hardship.
It was a slog to get through.
So bad. And like, he's great.
Yeah.
And he has a lot of insight into it, but it is a lot of like, this was like 25 years ago. I don't really remember.
Right. That was the thing. It was a commentary done for the Scream Factory collector's edition for Black Christmas. And so it was something that was done years after the fact.
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh yeah, this is the first time I'm watching this in years. So I'm a little unsure of some things.
Like, even like the camera man climbing the lattice, he's like, I don't really remember how he did this.
He's like, oh, well, clearly there was a second person there because you never see, or he's holding it himself because you never see both hands. And then the second hands come into frame and he's like, oh, well, clearly there was a second person there then.
It's like,
Okay. And then we look it up later and it's like, well, no, he had a whole rig that he used and that's how he did it. It's like, wow. Okay.
Bob Clark he's drinking Mrs. Max booze. My favorite is when she's in her closet and she's like, she reaches in, I think it's like a boot, and she pulls out a bottle and she's like, it's empty. And then she pulls out another one. Like, oh man. Her death is hilarious because the entire time, she is plagued by these girls. She is plagued by her job. She is plagued by Claire's father, who has arrived to find Claire, but she is missing. And he is very upset at her and the way the house looks. There's a poster of on the door of like a peace sign made out of flowers, and in the middle of it, these two people are clearly having sex. Her ass is out,
Yeah.
And so Mrs. Mack is like trying to cover the ass on the poster, like very frazzled. She asks Claire's father to bring her into town with him. And as she's getting ready, she hears her cat Claude begin to meow, follows the sound up to the attic and this one's an interesting one. This is the kill that kind of takes me out of the movie a little bit. Cause like, why do you have like a fucking theater, like batten pulley system in your attic? And why is it so strong that she can be bodily hoisted up the rest of the stairs?
Yeah.
It's just a little silly.
And in the commentary, it's one of the things that Clark says is that he wishes there was one extra shot, because the way that it's shot right now is like Billy swings that hook and it hooks her. And then we cut down looking up at the entrance to the attic, and her legs just like do and get pulled up. And he's like, well, now it just looks like somehow as soon as it snapped her, like it stabbed her, it just pulled her up on its own. And like we needed another shot of like Billy's hands like pulling the rope.
And then maybe the legs going up needed to slow down.
Yeah.
Because it is like,
It's a little comical.
it is like the Adam West Batman series. Like, whee, like it's ridiculous. But this isn't then the second
But-
body in the attic.
I will tell you the push in, the zoom onto Claire's body from Mrs. Mack's point of view, and like the realization is horrifying.
It's horrifying. Yeah.
It is. And then, just you hear a sound behind you and you just slowly have to turn around. And yeah, absolutely terrifying.
The next sequences where our protagonist reaches out to Peter, her significant other, it seems very much like a college boyfriend, like a college fling.
Right. Well, he seems very much more into it than she is.
Yeah.
And as we are shown through the movie, for very good reason.
Yeah, because A, he's fucking crazy pants. But B, this is a heavy subject that this movie tackles a very long time ago. This is something that movies and TV, like the abortion episode of Family Guy. I remember reading an article as it aired. Family Guy is an irreverent and always has, this kind of political overtone to its subject matter. And its abortion episode was pulled.
Yeah.
They couldn't air it. Now they're airing on Fox, which is already something. But I mean, so she calls Peter and they meet in this musical conservatory. Okay. They meet in this musical conservatory. He's playing. They have this conversation wherein she reveals that she's pregnant, and he's immediately elated and over the moon. And she drops, "I'm not keeping it," which, especially right now, that is crazy for that movie to talk about. It's crazy.
Well, it's crazy at the time because Roe v. Wade had just been passed in the year before, 73.
Yeah.
So like it's on the public conscience, but like it's still like a big thing for like a little horror movie to
A little
kinda
horror movie, but
tackle.
also to have your protagonist say, because, I think that, it's a pro-choice standpoint being made from a movie in the early 70s by a female character that is your what would later be coined as a final girl. It is your heroine of the film, and the stance is of Peter's is, well, no, let's get married. I'm going to drop out of music. I'll get a job. We'll marry. And she's like, bitch, I don't like you. I don't want to marry you. I don't want to have this fucking baby.
Yeah, this is a later scene whenever they like really have it out at the sorority house, where he like really just doubles down on all this of like, basically this early one is her saying like, this is what's happening. This is why I've been distant with you. I'm pregnant. I don't want to keep it. And he's like, don't you ever think of anybody but yourself. Like,
yeah, I think he calls her a selfish bitch at one point, and it gets heated in this. And then
he's like, okay, well, you go off and you think about it, and then I will see you later.
Yeah.
And then they meet up again he shows up at the sorority house.
Well, and in the middle of that, he's shown some sort of exam, like a recital.
Yeah, it's his, I guess recital's the best thing. It's whatever your final thing is.
Yeah. I don't know if that would be an exam or a recital for music, but he has his end of year review for this music course that he's taking, and he fucks up. Yeah. Because he's super stressed about the situation. And it seeds the red herringness of Peter, because he smashes the piano with a microphone stand. Yeah. And then when we see him again, and we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but we see him again in the sorority house where he's speaking to her and is just,
well, and he's shown in the sorority house that he's just been inside the house. Yeah. Like she's taking a phone call, sleeping, and then you see these feet come down the stairs behind Jess, and it's that thing of, is this Billy? Is she about to be attacked? And then it's revealed that it's Peter. And it's that thing of like, okay, well, we don't know if Peter's the killer or not. But also, how did you get in here? And how long have you been in here?
Right. Why are you so comfortable with someone who has actively told you, my plan is to have this abortion and leave you to sleep in her, assumedly her bed? Just creepy. The dude's a fucking creep. And then he's shown to be really aggressive.
Yes, because he more or less threatens her. Yeah. He has the comment of, you're saying that you're just going to get rid of our baby as if it were a wart, as if it were nothing. And she keeps on of just like, and he does the begging thing, like you said, of, I'm going to quit. I'm not happy with what I'm doing with this music thing, because he believes he's failed his final or whatever that was. And so he's like, I'll just quit, and we'll move, and we'll get married, and we'll raise this kid, and it'll be great. And she's like, no. When we got together, I told you my plan. It was, I don't want to do this. I want to go and live. I want to travel. I want to get my degree. I want to do the things. I want to live life.
I think, and I might be paraphrasing, but I think her exact quote is something like, when we got together, you told me your dreams and I told you mine. Well, mine haven't changed. And it's like, I still want to do that, which is, and culturally and politically now, I think that's a big deal, because from the narrative of this story, it is her, that's her decision to make. It's her choice. And Peter needs to like butt the fuck out, and he's such a fucking creep. I mean, to the point where it's like the very end sequence, and again, jumping ahead, but the very end sequence, him like smashing a window to see like, hey, is that you? Is that you? Hey, is it you? Is it you? Through the window, and then like the basement window, and he smashes through it and comes in, and he's like, hey, he sees her, and she's like holding a weapon and is terrified. And he's like, hey, why didn't you answer? It's just me, just Peter. It's like, yeah, you scare the fuck out of me, dude. You're huge. You clearly have a problem taking no for an answer. You are, and I think that's a problem that we still face.
Absolutely.
And I unfortunately don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. And it's heartbreaking, because even this schlocky fucking Christmas horror movie shows how tumultuous this can be for women in general. And I'm pleased with the way it's shown in this movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I don't give a fuck what you think. It gives our lead, just that extra bit of agency, that extra bit of, I'm a strong character and I'm going to survive, and we'll get to whether or not that happens.
But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think Jess's performance, Olivia's performance, I should say, as Jess, is impressive. I think the writing and the direction of these scenes, whether they thought that they were making a statement at the time or not, because in his commentary, Bob kind of plays it off just like, yeah, it was just a thing. It was just, they weren't thinking about it at the time, but it's just like, no, this was like an important statement to be made. And it was important then. It's just as important now.
Yeah.
Because people will say that. I'm just like, oh my God, this movie is, it's even more relevant now than it was then. And it's like, no, that's the incorrect way of looking at any of that whenever it happens. It's not that it's more relevant now. It's that it's still relevant because nothing has changed in 50 years.
Yeah, nothing. Not a thing. Conversations like that
just celebrated its 50th anniversary.
Yeah, and conversations like that are happening right now in households right now.
Yeah.
Or music conservatories, wherever.
Speaking of music, the scene where he smashes the piano, I find interesting because you're listening to the sound of him smashing, the piano strings and everything, and he destroys, what I assume is a very expensive piano.
Yeah, probably.
And then that sound of the clangs and the
dissonant sort of.
Yeah, it then just kind of builds into the score because the score of this movie is odd.
Yeah.
The composer Carl Zittrer, I believe is how you pronounce it, purposefully did strange things that you wouldn't normally do to kind of create a sound for this film and for the score. But it plays with this idea, and we talked about this a little bit with Scream 6, I believe. No, Scream 5 with Kyle Gallner's character.
How Red Right Hand is playing on the radio, and then it becomes the score.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what that is diegetic versus non-diegetic sound. And diegetic is elements that are within the world of the film, and then non-diegetic are the score, the things that are experienced by us, the audience, but not the people in the movie itself. And so it plays with that of diegetic things become non-diegetic with him destroying this piano that then becomes the score. I just find it interesting. And it's much in the same way that Bob Clark, in the commentary, he stresses over and over again the difference between the objective versus the subjective camera movements in the film. And so whether or not this is, at any given time, is this the killer's perspective or is this not the killer's perspective? I just find that interesting.
Yeah.
We're playing with these ideas of what exists within the film and what exists outside of the film.
It's funny because it almost takes a completely different feel, the camera movements, the way it's shot. When you leave the sorority house, when she goes to meet Peter, when you're in the campus with Claire's father, or eventually leads us to the next kind of big point. They go to the police station and enter in John Saxon.
Yes, we haven't mentioned John Saxon. He plays Lieutenant Fuller. He, as most people probably know listening to this podcast, he plays Nancy's father in A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes.
But he has done a ton of other stuff, and he has given an incredible, to me, I like his performance a lot in this movie.
Yeah, it's one of the more grounding performances. It's less, I'm acting like it's less, I'm a young person, and more, I am, I clock in, I get the coffee, I'm ready to roll. And he's one of my favorite cop performances, I think. And I mean, it's up there with Sheriff Brackett.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
He reminds me a lot of that.
Yeah. He seems to genuinely care for what's happening with these girls.
Yeah.
And, trying to figure out who is doing it and what has happened and to catch the killer, if you will. But at the same time, he's having to pull the whole college together to search for this missing 13-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Who's gone missing after, walking home from school.
He also seems unflappable. Through the horror of it all, he just doesn't seem fazed. He just seems to be, well, you got to stay safe, ladies. We got to keep you safe.
But never, to me at least, never in a degrading way. Yeah. And he seems very human in moments as well. There's a point where he comes to the sorority house and he's talking with them and they're tapping the phone. And this is a little later. But he makes the joke of like, anybody else in the house? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, Barb, she's asleep right now. And he's like, is Barb the one who came to the police station earlier? Maybe we should just let her sleep. Because it's like, yeah, they've already dealt with like Barb.
Yeah, well, and he is the smart, capable, and then you have like the idiot asshole cop at the desk.
Yes.
Whose name
Nash.
Nash. I remember his name. His name's Nash. His performance is also great.
Yeah. Like,
he is irritated. He is impatient. He is like police. Like, it is a caricature of
a bad policeman.
Of a bad cop. Like, I don't fucking care. Leave me the fuck alone.
He's dumb, and you're just like, how does this guy have a gun?
And it's like
that's his job.
It's almost like sexist of like, oh yeah, ladies, you're worried about your friend, you're getting shitty phone calls. And then you have John Saxon who's like, wait, let me get this straight. So girls come in saying that their friend is missing.
Including that girl's father.
Right. And then later on, somebody from that house calls because they're getting creepy fucking calls over and over and over. And you don't think those things are connected?
Yeah. You didn't piece that together?
And he's just like, I just worked the front desk, man. I don't know. Well, no, he doesn't say that, but that's basically his character of like, I'm just a receptionist. I don't know. Yeah. They prefer professional assistant when they're men. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's not true.
What's interesting, like with the John Saxon casting, is that he was a last minute replacement. He, at the time, there was another actor who had gotten the role, and Bob Clark had taken the actor, and they were like on set, they were taking him out for dinner or whatever, and he was clearly having some issues, and what ended up being he was suffering from some early onset Alzheimer's symptoms. And so he was no longer, this was Edmund O'Brien was the actor's name. He's a legendary actor, but sadly had to let him go from the role. And then they called John Saxon and was like, you got 2 days to get it to Toronto and we start shooting. And
so he was like, hey, che cosa? Barabucci, because he's
Italian?
Yeah, wow. Thanks, man.
You're welcome, buddy.
You're always here to tell me the names of places that I'm blanking on at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I hope you do the same for me.
No.
Okay.
I won't remember them. That's your job.
Margot Kidder, Barb, almost always drinking or drunk.
Sad portents of things to come.
Yes. According to Bob Clark, apparently she was very method and just drank actual alcohol on set.
We are not going to explain anything about that. Again, feel free to Google it on your own.
But yeah, she brings a little bit of the comic relief. The cops bring a little comic relief.
Mrs. Mack, Mack, until her untimely pulley demise.
There's one little scene where when they're searching for the missing girl, there's like two guys who are like on the neighborhood watch, and they come and knock on the door, and they try and do that.
That scene stuck out to me because it's Jess and Phil, and they open the door, and one of them is holding a shotgun, but like kind of under his arm,
and he keeps kind of pointing it.
It's pointed right at Jess's head, and it's like, you have somebody who is out here killing your friends. You believe there's a man pointing a gun at you.
They don't seem too concerned.
Beat him with a fire poker until he is dead. That is what you do.
That comes later.
You understand? You have one goal, and that is to find the murderer and smack him to death with a fire poker.
That comes later.
Mm-hmm. Is a fire poker?
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Is a fire poker in 5th edition? Would that be an improvised weapon, or would that be a club?
I thought we wanted to seem cool to these people.
That cat's out that bag. They hear us talk, and they're like, "Oh, those guys." They do lame stuff in their free time. They watched Black Christmas 3 times in 1 week.
It's what we do for you, all of you people at home that are hopefully listening. Barb is also shown to have asthma.
Yes.
There's like one scene early on where she
doesn't really pay off.
She has asthma. She has a nightmare because of it. It brings on a fit of asthma.
Somebody gives her an inhaler.
Yeah.
It's done. But that's not how she's killed in any way. No. It doesn't really bring anything. Barb's unfortunately unicorned to death.
Yeah.
With a large, she has like a collection of like
crystalline
statues. Yeah. And one of them is a unicorn with like a preposterously long horn.
Yeah.
It's like a leg. If that unicorn was proportionate, it would be the size of one of its legs. And Billy, just freaks out and stabs her to death with it.
Yeah. Now, what's cool about that scene is you see the silhouette of Billy whenever he's doing those kills. You see his hands, holding the unicorn and stabbing. He brings them up above his head, and you get this one little spotlight that goes on his right eye. And so you see his eye. Now, in a scene very briefly before that we already discussed, the scene where Peter is arguing with Jess. We see him be violent in that scene, other than just threatening her verbally. He breaks like one of the baubles on the Christmas tree. But then whenever he steps in like closer to her to tell her like, do not kill our baby or you're going to be sorry. And he steps kind of into a shadow, except there's a light shining onto his right eye.
Well, and another thing is he breaks one of the baubles on the tree, and as he's killing Barb, and you have that pull away of the hand holding the unicorn, one of the shots, it pulls up, and then you get like almost like a reflective view of it through a Christmas ornament's reflection, and it's covered in blood. So it's just another kind of...
Yeah. Which is also like almost a bloodless movie.
Yeah.
Other than
just about.
that, you see that blood on the unicorn, and you see it on Barb's hand as
and
it
then
like smashes the other glass.
When they're piled on top of each other.
Yes, that's
you
true.
See blood there. And I think there's a little bit of blood on Mrs. Mack. Oh, and in the end, Peter in her lap, he's got blood on his like hairline and in his mouth.
But not a lot.
He should have blood on his ass.
Not a lot of
creepy fucking asshole. I hate that fucking character. It's a good performance because I hate that fucking guy.
Truly that is it. Because it is one of those things where like you don't feel sorry that he gets it in the end.
No, especially because Jess gets to kill him.
Yeah.
The people, the Andy Griffin and Barney Fife walking up to the door is because there is a girl that has gone missing, and they find her corpse as part of a search party. So like Billy like seemingly killed a trail up to the sorority house and then climbed up, which is another thing that's almost kind of unique to this movie because it's like most of the horror movies that have a killer that focuses on a group of people begins and ends with that group of people.
Right.
This one, it's interesting because it's like, oh no, yeah, he murdered a swath. It is very Michael Myers-y in that first Halloween movie where, he kills the mechanic to get the truck and the jumpsuit, and then you can follow a bloody trail.
Right.
But this one's disturbing because it's, I think they say she's 13.
She's 13, yeah.
Yeah, 13-year-old kid he kills her. It's also like presumed based on the context of the phone calls and the fact that they're younger girls and that, the first victim was 13, that he's almost like kind of pedophilic.
Yeah. Or
really dark.
Yeah, because things that are kind of revealed throughout the phone calls, Bob Clark had this whole backstory for Billy that he had written just to kind of get the person who does the voices and things like that into character or to have an idea of what to kind of talk about. It's not explored in this. It's actually explored more in the 2006 remake, which we will probably eventually cover at some point on this show.
And it will be an okay discussion for just an okay movie.
I like that movie pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah. But in doing so, we kind of learn that Billy seems to have like done something to his baby sister Agnes.
Agnes, yes.
Which actually there is a reference in Scream 2. The opening scene of Scream 2, whenever Omar's character is in the bathroom of the theater and he's hearing the phone call or the voices coming from the other side of the bathroom stall, the names Billy and Agnes are used.
That's funny.
So it's a little nod to this. Barb's murder happens and it's covered up. They do this a couple times because Claire's murder earlier happens and it's covered up by the excitement of the girls showing Mrs. Mack her present. And then this one, Barb's murder is covered up by the kids caroling downstairs. They drown out any sounds that are coming up there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just this kind of like odd juxtaposition that we keep cutting back from, which is the point of the scene, where it's these like pristine little children singing on the porch, and Jess is watching them, and it's snowing, and the lights are bright on everyone's faces, and they're singing this beautiful Christmas carol, and we cut back
dark, nasty room where this hungover girl is getting stabbed to death by a psychotic serial killer.
Yeah.
Their vocals at the very end, their vocals slow down and distort. And I made a note, which was, that's the most disturbing part of the movie to me.
Yeah.
Is their vocal, because it's closed in on a little boy singing. So I think they're singing Silent Night. Mm-hmm. And it closes in on his mouth, like his nose and mouth, and like the bottoms of his eyes. The camera is closed all the way in, and it's just starting to slow down. And it was just like her being stabbed to death. And it's just creepy. Mm-hmm. Creepy visuals, because I love the Christmas season, always have, and it's supposed to be not that. It's supposed to be not your friends getting butchered as you are in a sorority house.
Yeah, that's what you would hope.
Yeah.
But sometimes
you get stuck in a snow globe after Krampus, uses toys and kills your family.
That's also true. We're going to get to that at some point.
Next Christmas.
Next Christmas, yeah. That's a promise.
Yeah, we promise. Wink.
Phyllis, we haven't talked about her a whole lot.
She kind of takes the center stage from Barb as the friend after Barb is upstairs asleep.
Yeah,
and then, she makes an ass of herself at a dinner and kind of goads Claire's father.
Yeah, and so Phil basically sends her to bed of just you're doing this again, and then you need to go cool off.
From that point, she is kind of friend character.
Yeah, and she has her emotional beats and things like that. She's played by Andrea Martin, who she's done a lot of voice acting as well. She did a voice in Anastasia in 1997.
Oh, okay.
She is Aunt Miriam, I think is the character's name, in the Rugrats movie and in several Rugrats things. And then the main one is from Jimmy Neutron, the movie and the show. She is the voice of Mrs. Fowl, the teacher.
That's my impression.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
But then she was also in all of the My Big Fat Greek Wedding movies.
The fuck?
She's one of the aunts in that.
I guess she is probably Greek.
Yeah,
That
possibly.
would make sense.
And then she is, I think, the only returning actor that goes into the 2006 Black Christmas remake, where she gets to play Mrs. Mack.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I like that. I didn't know that at the time of watching that. That's fun.
But yeah, I like that actress a lot. And so then, unfortunately, she's kind of been she's there for Jess anytime that she needs her. There's a point where, Jess keeps getting, the police have come, they've tapped the phones, they're trying to catch, where are these calls coming from? And Jess is getting these phone calls from both Billy. She's also getting calls from Peter, who's calling and begging and pleading with her, to not kill the baby. And Lieutenant Fuller is listening in on these things. He's asking questions. He's basically putting together well, it's probably Peter. Peter's probably the one doing this. And Phil is there for Jess in those moments. And there's that scene in particular, you actually see there's a shadow whenever Phyllis and Jess are sitting across the couches from each other, and they're talking about well, could it have been Peter? And Jess is no, because Peter was here in the house when one of the calls came in, so it couldn't have been him. And in the background of that shot, you see a shadowy figure, in the far, far back, and it's Billy, presumably, listening in. I think that happens in another scene as well. You see something like that in the background, and it is because he's just been in the house the whole time.
Well, he also has to be eavesdropping as well. There's, making a minor detour back to Peter. Mm-hmm. Peter mentions, like you said, you're talking about murdering our baby, removing a wart. And in one of the phone calls, Billy says that exactly.
Right.
It's like removing a wart, which immediately makes her think that it is. It's like a red herring that doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's fun for the tension, the suspense of it all. Of is it him?
Yeah. It is one of those red herrings that ultimately just to me, I like the way that this movie ends. I like.
My problem
I'm fine with it not being revealed who the killer is.
I think my only problem with the way that this movie ends is that nothing that's set up pays off. This is not a movie of setup and pays off. This is it's a movie of a bunch of setups and then it's just everybody gets murdered.
Yeah,
and
one by one. Phil goes up to check on Barb. She gets killed. We don't see that one. Again, they keep a lot of the violence off screen.
Yeah. This is about when we get the phone call of, that we played as our clip for this episode of, the calls are coming from inside of the house. It's revealed the police officer that's stationed outside of the sorority, Billy gets the jump on and kills.
Which again, we do not see, we do not know until it's revealed that he's dead. That is the scene. The call is coming from inside the house. I really love the scenes where we're tracing the call and the guy at the telephone company is like having to run down the aisles of this thing. I don't understand how any of that works.
No, my best guess watching is that when a call is there and you have a trace, it like illuminates a bank of this giant, what looks like a server room.
Yeah.
And you have to pinpoint which bank it is. And then from that, you can, I don't know. Everything is speculation, but it's the way he's running around. It's like he's looking for a visual cue.
And like certain ones, because there's all these cables and these little like cylinders, and they keep like, some of them are moving up and down, and some of them like the cables are like kind of moving. He runs down. Here's the thing that I noticed. And I'm like, I clearly don't know what's going on. Right. As he's running, he's looking at all these things. He gets down to the one that he finds. Say A, B, C. There's 3 of them in a row. A is moving. Like the column and the cable are like moving. He then goes over and he pulls the cylinder off of B. Okay. The one that wasn't moving. Right. And he like looks up underneath it. He puts it back into place. And then he plugs into what looks to be C, the next one over. Right. And it's like, well, are all of those connected? Or
there is a fair chance that that's not how any of it worked in real life and it just looked good. Or maybe that is how it worked, but now it's cell phones and fuck whatever that is. Now you don't have to trace a call. It's there on Life 360 and hey, Google, where is murderer? And it goes, oh, he's right over here. And then you figure it out.
Yeah, movies are a lot shorter now.
Yeah. That's what I like about it.
I just find that scene fascinating.
It's coming out of the Scream franchise and looking at how they handle the technology. It's like, well, how does Scream happen with cell phones? And then they actually make it pretty interesting. Like with modern day cell phones, they use some of that technology and they make it pretty interesting, but Black Christmas doesn't work. It doesn't work. No. It's like, well, whose phone is that? Oh, he's right there. Ready? It's he's running around plugging in everything. Nowadays, it's ready. He walks up to a thing at a desk and there's a button. And it goes up right there. Calls coming from the house. First time.
Are there even operators anymore?
No, I don't believe so.
Like that's not a thing you can call. Can you hit 0 and do anything?
I don't think so. Well, and there's like no phone booths.
Right.
So like all of an entire industry gone. Yeah. That's what the real horror of Black Christmas is.
That's true.
Black Christmas is the first episode of Black Mirror.
Oh, yeah. That's a twist.
Also a bit of wordplay.
It's revealed that the calls are coming from inside the house. She is told, she is begged, she is screamed at to just leave.
Stop asking me questions. Get the fuck out of the house. Oh, that guy, by the way, Nash, he's gonna die.
Yeah.
Because the
Lieutenant Fuller
straight up was like, if you fuck this up, I'll kill you.
He's begging for his life on that phone.
Stop.
Please, just go outside.
He's gonna kill me, please.
There's about to be 2 killers, just like Batman said.
Oh my God.
She grabs a fireplace poker instead. She goes upstairs.
Finds her friends staged and brutally killed, which is another source of blood in the film.
And then whenever she kicks that door open and discovers them, that's when the other most horrifying but simple image in the entire movie happens of the eyeball. Yeah. Billy's eye in the crack of the door.
Like he was standing behind the door. She opens the door, looks in the crack, sees his eye, and it's haunting.
Because, I mean, to me, it's that thing of how close you are to death. A standard bedroom door is between you and the man who's been terrorizing you all night and who now you have seen have killed your two best friends.
Not only, but it's that, and it's, oh, no, I was right. Psycho in the house. Mm-hmm. It's like everybody was right. They're in the house. It's confirmed fear immediately. And then she fucking runs away.
Yeah. It is the sound design for like Billy's breakout and freak out there is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Because we, the audience, still don't really get to see Billy. We see his eye, we see his hand come around the door, and then we just hear him. She runs down the stairs. She tries to get out the front door, but can't because of a line that Mrs. Mack had delivered earlier about like, oh, the door keeps getting stuck. I've asked the handyman to fix this 100 times.
Okay, so that is a setup payoff.
Yeah. So then she ends up running down into the basement, locks the door, and he's just like trying everything he can to break that door down.
Yeah.
It is horrifying how loud and frantic it all is.
Which, to go back to Peter, that's when he's outside the window and he seems to be doing the same thing. And like, we know logically it's not him. Yeah. We're aware that it's not him. But even still, it's like Billy's screaming, banging at the door, trying to get the door broken into. And then all of a sudden, Peter is, Jess? And he's knocking on the window. He tries to get in. He smashes the window. He goes down. And then the next time, he approaches her, cut to
the police showing up and breaking in themselves to the basement, and they find
she's like
they're like collapsed on the
unconscious,
staircase,
and he's laying on her. Peter is, and he's got blood all over his face and his mouth, and it's assumed that he's dead. That she bashed his fucking brains in. Which, by the way,
but in that moment, we don't know if she also is dead.
Yeah. Which, by the way, that's again great.
Yes.
What a great moment.
Good for her.
Yeah, she smashed his ugly piece of shit brains in, and then he's not ugly. He's fine looking, but his brains are ugly.
Yeah.
And then she wakes up, brought upstairs, kind of trauma treatment. Everybody's being given that trauma treatment. Claire's father, everybody's kind of relaxing a bit. And, we see the police kind of step back outside of the house.
Well, it's like the reporters and everybody have shown up and Fuller is just like, get them out of here. I will give them a statement down at the, police station, but get them out. And so they leave to take care of that. The police leave to take care of that. Claire's father like stands up, and then I think just the excitement of everything has taken him and he passes out.
So other cops are like, let's get him to a hospital.
Yeah. They put Jess under with some sort of medicine to help her relax.
The shock of it.
They're like, you won't get a statement out of her for the next 4 hours, bare minimum.
Yeah.
And everyone leaves. There's a cop that comes in, clicks off the light, and we hold on this shot of her in the bed for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it slowly pans around to the next bedroom where Barb and Phil were found. And then it pans down the hallway to Claire's bedroom. We stop there for a second. And then it pans, like it has several times throughout the movie. We haven't mentioned it, and then it pans up to the attic entrance.
Yeah, we look at that attic entrance. It's almost like, is he in the house or is he in the attic? Because it's like, is the door opening or is the door closing? Kind of signifies where he's operating from. And
this shot is, to me, it's reminiscent of the end of John Carpenter's Halloween, where the very end of the movie is Michael has disappeared from the lawn. And then they, with shock in their face, are just kind of like, where could he be? And then we just cut to these just shot of the kitchen, shot of the hallway, shot of the staircase, shot of the living room, just these empty rooms. But it's to symbolize like he could be anywhere. He is out there somewhere.
He is the boogeyman.
Yes.
And here we have a similar treatment of that because this is a chilling ending because he always calls after he kills somebody. We leave Jess in the room alone. We pan up to the attic. We see Claire with the bag still on her face. I guess the cops also don't think checking the attic is important.
Yeah, there is a line apparently in the mono mix of the movie that you can hear one of the cops saying like, oh yeah, we're going to do a full sweep of the house. But they haven't done that yet.
Oh, gotcha.
So
the pan outside, and then as the credits roll, sitting on a static shot of the front of the house, credits begin to roll, and that phone rings. So it's left to our imagination, but the movie is, I believe, heavily symbolized. I think it's heavily signifying your lead just died.
Yeah.
They thought they caught the killer in Peter, and they didn't. He was still in the house. They didn't do a good enough job, and now your lead is dead.
Yeah. It is a ambiguous but tragic ending.
Yeah, and there's no one left to pick up the phone.
Yeah. There's one cop who is on the stoop.
Yeah.
Who has been left to watch the house. And we end on that shot as the credits roll, the phone is ringing, and it's almost a matching shot to the opening of the film. It's just the outside of the sorority house with the lights on. Apparently, after seeing the ending of the film, studio executives, they asked the director to change the ending. They weren't happy with it. And they had proposed the idea to have the cops leave Jess alone with Chris. Chris is Claire's boyfriend. We haven't mentioned him, but he pops in a couple times throughout the movie. He's never seen as a red herring. He's more of just like
a concerned guy. Yeah.
And, his girlfriend is missing, so he's there. So Jess is alone with Chris, and then Jess wakes up and he says, "Agnes, don't tell them what we did." And then he kills her. And Bob Clark was like, "Well, no, I refuse to do that. I'm keeping my ending," because it doesn't make logical sense for Chris to then just randomly be the killer at the end.
I like the fact that this guy is just somebody who happened to be in his path. It makes it more psychotic. It makes it more random. And the random acts of violence are always the scariest. I think that that's a better fit.
Absolutely.
I think it's just a guy who has a fucked up life, who has resulted to murder, has ended up in this place. I just think that works better.
Yeah, I agree completely.
It's Michael seeing Lori by happenstance is better. I hate the explanations of, oh, well, it's his sister. Oh, well, I like the explanation that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride eventually give of, no, it was just random. He just saw her, and now we are pushing them together because we need it to make sense, which I think is that pitched ending. It's what we want it to make sense, but the reason we want it to make sense is because, disclosure.
Right. That's how movies are supposed to act. That's how they're supposed to play out.
I think the reason, one of them, that Black Christmas is so chilling, the original after so long, is that there is no Billy. It's just a psychopath. Is that his name? Is that story real? Is any of that real? It's the ambiguous nature of where he was, what he was doing the entire time. It's just that is the effective storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think that Bob Clark was kind of groundbreaking in that. I think that that's brilliant. And I think it's one of the reasons why because you've got like Silent Night, Deadly Night, and you've got Krampus, and you've got all of these kind of hokey, and Krampus isn't hokey, but it plays with hokiness.
Yeah.
It tangos with it. This movie's not hokey. This movie doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it's fucking Christmas. The Christmas is the juxtaposition of this should be a nice, wonderful time. Yeah. And it's not. It's terrifying. And it's great. I really enjoy this. My expectation of this is...
Yeah, I was going to ask, what was... Because I think at that point, I'd have to look back at our letterbox to see what we had watched in order back then. But we had watched Krampus, I'm sure. We had watched probably Silent Night, Deadly Night, and Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. And then probably this.
Yeah, I think this was right before the actual Christmas holiday. I'd never heard of this movie. I didn't know it existed. I and rolled my eyes hearing the title Black Christmas.
Right.
I thought it was ridiculous. Mrs. Mack entering and Dylan laughing his fucking ass off about her hiding her booze kind of lightened the tension. But by the end of it, I remember this one stuck out. This one stuck out as like I see so much inspiration drawn from this throughout the next 30 years of films that we've watched.
Absolutely.
And then I also just think that it's a weird little low budget horror movie made in a period where they didn't make stuff like that. And it's just really well done. It's well made. It's a director with a vision who didn't compromise, and a bunch of, inventive and ingenuitive people who came together to make that work. Really talented cast, mega stars for the time.
Yeah.
It's lightning in a bottle to make this weird little Christmas movie. And all this time later, it's gotten 2 remakes. Neither of them, I don't think either of them understand, especially the 2019 one. The 2019, the only thing it shares with the original Black Christmas is the title. The aughts remake of it is a little different. It's mostly the same, but they really go into the backstory of the killer, which I think is detrimental to the movie in general, because like this movie, I think not having that suggested through like whispers is better. It's creepier. It's a different kind of whodunit.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah, the whodunit of Scream is, well, who's Ghostface? The whodunit of Black Christmas is, is it anyone we know, or is this just chaos?
Yeah.
And I think it's effective visually. I think it's effective. Their score is effective. Hearing stories that, like Joe Bob Briggs, we watched one of his episode where he hosts it. And he talks about how composers for this would use like little forks on piano strings and just rake it across to make creepy sounds. And it's really effective. But then the whole time there's like Christmas music, like ambiently, and it's just it's
the juxtaposition of it is something else. It is. It's it's a movie I have revisited several times over the years. It's one that had kind of like the DVD and stuff had gone out of print for a while, so it was kind of hard to find, and then it had kind of gotten a new life for a while. There's been several attempts over the years to produce like a sequel for the movie, but it just never happened. The remake happens in 2006, and then after the failure of that, it didn't make money like they hoped. Bob Clark had begun working again on a sequel before he tragically passed away in a car crash due to a drunk driver. That was in 2007.
That's awful.
But it's said that in his sequel idea, Olivia Hussey and John Saxon were to reprise their roles as Jess and Lieutenant Fuller. So I guess in Bob Clark's mind, maybe Jess had survived. And then that Jess would have become the new house mother of the sorority for that sequel.
Okay.
And so carry it on. I mean, in a legacy sequel, which at that point, not a lot of legacy sequels had happened at that point. So he was still kind of like forward thinking and like, oh yeah, let's do a sequel. But how do we do a sequel 30 years later?
As interesting as that sounds, and as good as I'm sure that would have been, I'm happy it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm happy that this is what we have. Because even if it's just the one, this is the movie that I think, looking at the whole thesis of our show is what did I, how do you remember it and what did I expect? And because I didn't know about it, I didn't expect anything. But what I will say is that this is kind of the movie that made me respect the Christmas horror movie. The Christmas horror movie was always an eye roll. We keep bringing it up because it is one of the more popular Christmas horror movies, but Krampus is so ubiquitous now of that title. But this one, it barely has anything to do with the holiday, but because it's in its title and because it's in its branding and its imagery, it's just it stuck with me as like, oh no, yeah, I guess you can make a competent movie based around this holiday and not make it fucking gingerbread kill people with Christmas lights in the most chilling movie ever, Christmas murder movies #4. And it's, whatever. But, or Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. I have people who I know and love who have listened to this show, and they've asked me, you're in the intro, it says that you're a newbie, but you reference a bunch of directors and a bunch of movies. And
what does that make me?
The schmoopy because of Tubi, but they'll say, well, how do you reference like directors, you reference other movies, or you talk about, all of these different titles. I thought you were new. I thought you were watching these for the first time. How do you know about all of this stuff? So I am not watching these for the first time. I have watched them a couple years ago. I am a newbie in only in reference to you, because you have been doing this stuff for near 30 years.
Right. It's the difference of 30 years of watching horror and like 2 years of watching horror when we started this show.
It's a little less than 2 years now. Yeah.
But like in those 2 years, we have sat and watched. I mean,
So
there was
things.
almost, I would say there was almost a 12-month period where it was a nightly thing, at least 5 days a week.
And there were times where that was 2 movies a week.
Yeah.
Or 2 movies a night, excuse me. And so, I got really into this, and only after a long period of watching, franchise after franchise after franchise, it was like, well, we should talk about these because, I've only seen them once. You've seen them probably a dozen times, collectively. So we should talk about what it's like to rewatch them for you versus what it's like to rewatch them for me. Because rewatching it for me is like, oh shit, yeah, I've only ever seen this one time. I didn't know about it. What was my experience watching it the first time? Because that's interesting.
And so much like in the way that Scream brought us to watching these movies in the first place of like, hey, Scream 6 is coming out. Do you want to watch that? Okay, you do. Well, then you need to watch this. Shortly thereafter, the next big horror movie franchise that was having a new entry was Evil Dead Rise.
Right.
And so I said, well,
we were smarter this time. We didn't start.
Yeah.
We didn't start with the one right before it and then go all the way to the beginning.
which in this franchise, it wouldn't have made any sense anyway. But yeah, so we started with, over the course of like 2 weekends, I believe, we watched the Evil Dead whole franchise.
The entire thing.
Yeah. Like 2 movies a day, and then got to see Evil Dead Rise in theaters together.
Which is phenomenal.
Which, I mean, you've mentioned before on this show, but so yeah, that, if we haven't already said, because people have been asking me in life, just like, what are you doing next? You guys are wrapping up Scream soon. What are you doing? And it's like, oh, well, we're doing this.
We're going to let you all know what the next franchise is now, and it's Scream again.
No, it's not.
No, it's Evil Dead.
It is. The Evil Dead franchise, which will be a little bit shorter than the Scream franchise, just a little, but also a very different sort of movie.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is that it's totally going to take a completely different journey than Scream did, which keeps about the same tone for all 6 movies. We're going to go from experimental horror to a straight up, like, earnest movie to some pretty scary shit. Like some pretty dark and scary, fucked up shit.
That is, that is the real key there with this franchise is the scope and how it changes from, just different directors and different years, different decades that it happens in and what we're able to do. But I'm excited, it's one of those franchises that Nathan got me into, and we've talked a little bit about, we've mentioned it here and there, and the work of Sam Raimi. So I'm excited to get into that next.
Me too. They are classics, and some of them are new entries that hold their weight and punch pretty big. And I love this franchise. This will be interesting. Scream, I've watched a couple times. After the first watching, these, I've only seen the once.
Yeah. So they'll be fresh rewatches
They
for
will
you.
be, each and every one of them. I can't wait to watch Bruce Campbell just face act his fucking ass off. Well, his face off.
Yeah. I hope that everyone out there is enjoying the conversations that we're having here.
Yeah.
I hope that we have had a good holiday season.
Yeah.
And
happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
To whatever you celebrate, to whoever you celebrate with, I hope it's a good one. And we will see you in the new year for The Evil Dead on the Third Channel podcast.
Groovy. Thanks for tuning into the Third Channel podcast. Please, if you have the time, rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast apps.
You can follow us on social media at Third Channel Podcast, and you can find me online at thatdrosenberg.
You can also reach out to us at thirdchannelpodcast@gmail.com, where we check every message we swear. Third Channel is hosted by PJ Minette
And Derek Rosenberg. Theme song and audio engineering by Fly Guy Ty.
The logo designed by Bell DeVelco.
Episode artwork by Nathan Walkington.
Keep it tuned right here to the third channel for all things horror. And remember, don't touch that dial.
Egg salad and eggs.